Today I'm going to be showing you all how you can add a little more structure to your crochet bags. Crochet bags are a great way to stash bust, and they're also a really great handmade gift idea. You can use extra bits of colorful yarn that you have laying around to make a beautiful accent piece, and it's also a totally functional item that anyone will be happy to receive. If you're an Etsy or a market seller, you might find that making crochet bags is a great way to use up extra materials while also giving customers the opportunity to walk away with something that they might use every day. If you've ever made a crochet bag or if you've ever used one, then you may have noticed that over time they don't hold up that well. Due to the weight of the items that you're going to be putting in the bag, they often stretch and the straps will become warped and thin, they'll grow super long, but there are ways to prevent all of that stretching, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. In this video, I'll be showing you how by adding internal structural elements in the construction of your crochet bag, you can prevent stretching and make an item that feels higher quality. A quick disclaimer before we get into this, the first part of this video is very much giving tutorial. I'm going to be walking you guys through a technique that I've done many times and that I know how to do, and I think I can explain it pretty well. The second element of this video, which is going to be about adding lining to your bags, I was kind of winging it when I did this yesterday. I've done this before, but every time I've done it a little bit differently, so I don't have a precise way that I do it every time, and I'm just kind of rusty on my sewing. So in this video, I show you guys my process, but take that as a tutorial at your own risk, is all I'll say. So without further ado, let's get into it. Today I'm going to be showing you how I added structure to two different crochet bags. These are both Mother's Day gifts. One is for my mom and one is for my grandma. My mom specifically requested that I make her one of these bags after she saw an Instagram reel by Beth of Realm Designs where she showed the process of her making one. My mom is really into playing Mahjong right now, and she requested that I make her one of these bags in the colors of her Mahjong set so that she can use that bag when she goes to Mahjong and she can take all of her stuff with her in that, which I think is such a cute idea. For Gran's bag, this is gonna be a surprise. She doesn't know she's getting this. And she loves pink, so I picked a bunch of fun pink colors. I made these bags slightly differently. This one has a looser gauge than this one. I wanted to do the tighter gauge on this one because I didn't end up adding a lining to this one and I didn't want to, and we'll get to that in a second. I won't be showing you guys how to make these bags in this video because it's not my design. The designer whose bag I used as a reference actually has a full YouTube tutorial on how to make these bags, and so I'm just going to put that in the description below so you guys can check it out there. I didn't actually follow her tutorials, I just used the reel I saw as a visual reference and went from there, so my bag may differ slightly from hers, but I think our bags should be similar enough if you wanted to follow her tutorial and then this one. And the tips I'm about to give you guys do work for any crochet bag, so they don't just work for this pattern. I've done this on a bunch of different designs. Alright, so let's get into what the methods are. The two methods to adding structure to a crochet bag that I'm going to be talking about in this video are adding twill tape to your straps to reinforce it so it doesn't stretch, and I'll be adding a lining to the body of one of the bags so that it maintains its structure and it doesn't stretch out the design. For my grandma's bag, I won't be adding a lining, and I'll tell you why. It's because I want her to be able to use this as a market grocery bag that can hold a lot of things. Without the lining, this bag is going to be able to stretch a lot, so if she's going shopping or if she's going somewhere where she has to bring a lot of stuff with her, this is going to be able to hold a lot more. The downside of choosing to do this, of course, is that she won't be able to put anything small in here, just because of the holes. This is just a bunch of granny squares, so there's holes in it, and if she puts keys or lip gloss or anything small in here, it's subject to fall out. So that's going to function less as a purse and more just as a market bag is what I like to call it, because I think of like a farmer's market or something like that where you want to just be able to put a bunch of goodies in it. Okay, so let's move on to how I do straps on my crochet bags. To reinforce the straps of your bag, what you're going to need is twill tape. You can really use any thickness of twill tape that you want. This was just what my store had, but you could go thinner, you could go thicker. It doesn't matter too much, but I wouldn't go much thicker than a 1/2 inch, only because that might make it harder to conceal with crochet stitches, but we'll get to that later. Then you're going to need some yarn, and preferably this yarn matches the color of your twill tape. That's because you're going to be using the yarn to conceal it. It's not the end of the world if your yarn doesn't match your twill tape. Just know that in the end, it might end up being visible through the stitches, which isn't that big of a deal, but it's just kind of a matter of what aesthetic you want. Keep in mind that the yarn color choice that you make here is going to end up being the color for your border as well as the strap. You're going to need a crochet hook. Just use a crochet hook that was the same size as the one that you used for your bag. And of course, you need scissors. Why is doing this extra step useful? Well, it's a really good way to enhance the quality of your crochet, both affordably and simply. This twill tape I used cost $1 a yard at my local craft store, and I didn't really use that much at all per bag. I used about 20 inches of it on this bag, and I was making crossbody length straps. Doing this method only adds one quick step to the process of making the strap of your bag, which you're going to need to do anyway. The difference is just that rather than crocheting the strap completely from scratch, you're going to be crocheting around the twill tape. Okay, so here's how you do it. If you already know how long you want your straps to be, or if you're using a pattern that calls for a certain length strap, just go ahead and measure out that length on your twill tape. Make sure to add an extra inch to the desired end length because you're going to be tying knots on either end of the twill tape and you want to give yourself some allowance for that. So you can totally do that if you have a specific length strap in mind, but if you don't, here's what I do when I kind of want to freehand it. Take the finished body of the bag and hold it up on your body where you want the bag to sit. So whether that's like right here under your armpit or across your chest, if it's a crossbody bag, just place it where you're going to want the body of the bag to sit. And then take your twill tape and tie a knot at one of the corners of your bag. Because this bag is entirely granny squares, there's a really clear hole in the corner where I put my twill tape and where the straps are going to go. But this doesn't just work for this kind of bag. You can do it on any kind of crochet bag. So really just put the twill tape wherever you want your strap to start. So yeah, tie your knot, and when you tie your knot, make sure that you leave a little bit of twill tape hanging out of that knot, like the little tail end, because you're gonna lay that flat later against the crochet project and crochet around it to hide it. So if you leave it too short, it's just gonna poke out. So now that you tied your knot, take the twill tape and wrap it around your body in the shape that you want your strap to be. So for my grandma's bag, I played around with the idea of it just being a short strap, like purse length for a second, but ultimately, and I always do this, I decided to go with a crossbody shape. So just play around, see what feels good to you. Once you find your desired length, hold the twill tape in the spot of the other corner of your bag, cut it, leave a little bit of extra again, and then you tie it from there. So now that you have your tape tied onto your bag, we're gonna get started on the crochet portion of all of this. So you're gonna start with the border. You'll see the design choice I made here for this bag was to do the border in single crochet and to do the straps in double crochet, but that's just because I like the look of that. If you're following a pattern that does something differently, or if you just like the look of something different, feel free to do whatever stitches you prefer. Continue crocheting the border until you reach the knot. If you're working on the side where the tail end of your knot naturally falls, continue your border stitching going around the tape to conceal it. Once you get to the corner where the strap will begin, do one more stitch in the stitch pattern you were using for the border. In my case, this was a single crochet. Then in that same space, do a second stitch. This should be the stitch that you want to use for your strap. For me, that's a double crochet. Begin crocheting around the twill tape. For double crochet, this means I do yarn over, put my hook under the twill tape, then yarn over again, and then I pull the loop back towards on my hook, and then I finish the stitch as normal. Continue this until you reach the other side. Keep in mind, you don't want to do too few stitches on the twill tape, and you don't want to do too many. Too few stitches will make the tape itself warp and wrinkle, and too many stitches is going to make the crochet warp and wrinkle. So to prevent this, as you go along crocheting the strap, make sure to adjust the stitches as you go, just kind of stretching them out. Don't worry too much if as you do this there's gaps in between your stitches, because we're going to be filling in those gaps when we do the other side. Okay, so once you get to the end of your strap, it's really important to make sure that you continue doing your border stitches along the correct side. Otherwise, you're gonna have a twisty mess. I know that sounds simple, but it's gonna feel really weird when you're doing it because all of a sudden your work is turned. So just be careful. Same as the other side, just in reverse. In the space where you attach the twill tape, do one more stitch in pattern with the stitches that you were doing for your strap. So for me, that's double crochet. And then do one stitch in pattern with the stitches that you were doing for your border. So for me, that's single crochet. And then from there, you just continue finishing out your border. If the tail end of your knot appears on this side as well, crochet over it as I showed you on the other side. Then you just finish off your border on that side, and then we're gonna do the other side, which is, you guessed it, the same thing. So just get started with your border wherever you choose, and then continue up to the strap. Once you get to the twill tape, you're gonna be doing your stitches in between the stitches that you just did. So after I did my single crochet and then my double crochet on this side, I then did a double crochet onto the twill tape, and then I skipped over the stitch that was the first stitch from the other side, and I crocheted a double crochet after that stitch. So it's just that you're going in between all of those stitches that you just previously did. Explaining that with words is so tricky, but I'm hoping that you see what I mean. And then you just continue doing that all the way down the strap. By the way, don't worry too much about your twill tape getting twisted. It's not really ultimately going to affect anything. As long as you just make sure that you continue your border down the right side, you're going to be golden and it won't be twisted. Continue doing this strap and border as you did the other one, just putting the stitches in between the previous stitches. After you finish your border on this side, you're done. Simple, right? Any extra twill tape that's still hanging out from the knot, you can just trim. If your yarn color choice and your twill tape have a high contrast and you can still see the knot, don't worry because you can still disguise it a little bit. I didn't choose to do this because the white of my twill tape and the white of my yarn were pretty much a perfect match, so you couldn't really tell. But you can just wrap the yarn around the knot and then just tie it off and weave in your ends. But I wouldn't worry too much about it. That's part of why you put the 2 stitches in that space where the twill tape begins, because as the bag moves around, it kind of more or less covers the knot. But that's just an extra step you can do. So yeah, I'm super stoked about this. I love how this turned out. I love that she's going to be able to fit a lot of stuff in this bag. It's small, but it's mighty. Having a sturdy strap on this bag just makes it feel so much higher quality. So it's a gift I'm a lot prouder of giving. I think anything you can do to add structure to crochet just makes it look so nice, and this is one of those things that you can do. Even though in the case of this bag, because I didn't reinforce the body is going to stretch over time, the straps are not. And I feel like you can deal with a body of a bag being stretched out, but once the straps get too stretched out, then you can't really wear it. It just doesn't fit the same and it becomes loose, it slides off your shoulder, all that stuff. So I think she's going to be able to get a lot of use out of this one. And I'm excited. Happy Mother's Day, Gran. Okay, so moving along to how I did the lining for my mom's bag. So this is not a tutorial. I wanted to put it in the video because it is another thing that you can do to add structure to your crochet bags, and I'm sure that there are a lot of great tutorials out there, but this is just how I did it last night. In order to do this, you're going to need a few things. So you need some fabric. For the best results, I would suggest a non-stretchy fabric. Your fabric choice kind of depends on what you want out of adding a lining to the bag. So if your big goal, like mine, is to add structure to it, then don't pick a stretchy fabric. Pick something that doesn't have any stretch. So something like linen or cotton, or in this case, I had a lot of extra, I had so much satin fabric sitting in my fabric stash. I don't know why, but I used that because I thought that the color matched the bag really well. If you use a stretchy fabric, that's not a bad thing. It's just not going to do anything to the structure of the bag, but it will solve the problem of having holes in the bag that stuff can fall through. So like I was saying, this bag you would never want to put anything small that you don't want to lose in. Whereas with this bag, because it's lined, stuff's not going to fall out of it. So that kind of just depends on what you're going for. You also need scissors, a tape measure or a ruler, and something to mark the fabric with. You should use tailor's chalk. I don't have any, so I used a ballpoint pen because that's the level of DIY this is. So here's how I did it. I folded my fabric and I laid my bag on top of it. I put the bottom of my bag at the folded edge of my fabric. I then traced the shape of the body of the bag onto the fabric. I just made sure to stop where the strap started because I didn't need to line that. In hindsight, I wish I had just cut out the measurements of the bag. I wish I had just stayed true to the bag size. What I did, which you'll see, is I left an inch of seam allowance all around the bag, which is a lot of seam allowance anyway. But ultimately, the lining ended up being pretty big on this bag. In hindsight, I wish I had just cut out the measurements of the bag. You'll see I did an inch of seam allowance all around the bag, which an inch of seam allowance is always a lot. And especially for something like this, that much seam allowance is just like not necessary. The inside of the bag ended up being a little bit more voluminous than I was hoping for. Once I had the shape traced, I then folded the edges of the lining together so that the right side of the fabric was completely smooth. You'll see I'm pinning those folds here. Normally I would just iron them, but this fabric is secondhand and I don't actually totally know what it's made of, but I'm pretty certain it wouldn't do well to be ironed, so I didn't want to iron it. I just pinned it, but if you're using cotton or something like that, then just iron it here. Then I just pinned the lining to the bag. I chose to just like stick my lining in the bag and sew it that way. You could always flip it inside out and do it that way. If you know what I'm talking about, then you can do that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just look at what I'm doing and ignore what I just said. And then I just pinned the top of the lining to the border of my bag. I threaded my sewing machine with a thread color that matched the border of my bag, but not the lining of my bag, which was great because it means that in sewing over the crochet, you can't really see the sewing, but it does mean that if you look on the inside, you can see the sewing on the lining itself. I don't really mind that, but maybe in hindsight, it would have been cool if I had just done all matching colors for all those elements. Once everything was pinned, I very carefully began sewing on my sewing machine. I was kind of constantly checking that the bag wasn't stretching over the lining, because in the end that would have distorted the shape, so just make sure to do that. That's all there is to it, so with that your lining is complete. It's not perfect at all, but I'm really glad that I chose to add the lining to this one because I think it's gonna make it so it's a lot more functional for what my mom wants to use it for. This way she can put her keys, lip gloss, small stuff like that in her bag and not have to worry about it. Since doing this last night, I have already thought of different ways that I could have gone about sewing in the lining that I think I want to try in the future. But I do really like the way it looks, and I think the color that I chose is perfect for this bag. So yeah, I think adding lining is something that I want to keep working on, but that's just a very basic, easy way to do it in case you were looking for one. So that's it from me. I really just wanted to show you all how I do these little things to make my crochet projects feel a little bit more sturdy and durable. I love giving people handmade gifts. I love crocheting things for other people. What I don't like is giving them stuff that I don't think they're honestly going to use after a while. Crochet by nature just stretches over time, and there's a lot of care that goes into owning a crochet piece. I just like to make sure that I do little things that up the quality so they feel like they're getting something that they'll actually be able to use and use for a long time. Let me know in the comments below if you all tried this out and if it was useful for you, or let me know if you have any other things that you like to do to reinforce your crochet bags, or any other popular crochet items to make, little things that you do that just make them feel a little bit more finished. I'd love to hear it. If you guys aren't already, please make sure to subscribe to this channel. I post all things fiber arts related, and I've got a lot of project vlogs and stuff like that on my channel, so be sure to check them out. If you want to follow me on Instagram, my handle is @_the_dropstitch. It's the same handle as here on YouTube. And if you want to follow me on Ravelry, I am the Dropstitch with 2 H's at the end. I'm trying to up my Ravelry game, so if you guys follow me on there, I feel like it might make me feel like I need to like performatively build out my Ravelry page more. But yeah, that's gonna be all from me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until I see you next time, please make sure to drink some water, stretch your wrists, and please purl responsibly. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye!